Have you been upset that artificers weren't included in the new 2024 D&D Player's Handbook? Have you been excited by, or dismayed by, or interested to know more about the recent Unearthed Arcana Artificer announcement? Well, I've got good news. Today, we're going to build one using those UA rules, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody. So here at D4, each week I take a deep dive into a specific character build for my favorite role-playing games. Usually that means Dungeons & Dragons, not always. I like to theorycraft about them, crunch numbers about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a certain character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you just really enjoy theory crafting, or if you're looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here. So thank you for watching. My name's Colby. Right, so ever since the new Player's Handbook came out last September, I've been getting requests to do an updated Artificer build using the new rules. But I've been hesitant to do so, not because I don't love Artificers, I actually do, though that's not always been a sentiment I've held. I've come to really enjoy them, but it's because, well, without any kind of update to the class and subclasses from Wizards of the Coast, it just hasn't felt like there's a lot I could do with the new rules. There have been some changes to some spells that might be interesting, I guess. There have been some new general rules and weapon mastery stuff that maybe you could find a way to work in, maybe with some multiclassing if need be, but yeah, until we got some kind of official material from WotC on what the Artificer might look like, updated for 2024, felt like an exercise in futility. But then, about a month ago, at the time you're watching this at least, WotC came out with an official Unearthed Arcana for an updated Artificer, and there was much rejoicing. Yay! But then we actually read over the update. I did a live reading and reaction video with Will from D&D Shorts shortly after it came out. You can watch it up there if you missed it. And, well, the rejoicing was maybe downgraded to a mild golf clap. Don't get me wrong, there are some things in this Unearthed Arcana that are genuinely cool, that I'm excited about. I will talk about them. One in particular feels like it might be borderline overpowered, but most of the rest, to me, feels like maybe Wizards didn't go quite far enough with this update. That said, the thing that was initially the most interesting and exciting to me about this UA was the big announcement for the new armor model for my favorite Artificer subclass, the Armorer. We still have the Infiltrator and the Guardian models, but now there is an exciting third option, the Dreadnaught. And so it felt like, even though I typically don't do builds on Unearthed Arcana content, I just had to take a stab at this one, right? For two reasons. One, because I think interest might be high and the video might get a decent amount of views. I guess we'll see if I'm right on that front. But two, because, yeah, I really like Artificers, and if I refuse to do any Artificer builds with the 2024 rules until we have like an official release in a book from WotC, it might be a 2-year drought of builds with Artificer levels in them, and that will not stand. So I figured today we can try to build around the Dreadnaught, both to see how it compares to other builds that I've done so far for 2024, but also, maybe, to thus analyze the good and the bad of this Unearthed Arcana, using not just gut impressions, but actual numbers and math and stuff. In before the "it's not all about the numbers, you're doing it wrong" comments, which you are absolutely welcome to still make in the comment section if you want to. But this Dreadnaught is going to be awesome. A bruiser that does decent damage, coupled with fantastic survivability and a healthy heaping of battlefield control. Okay, ready to dive in? I'm excited to present D&D episode number 198, the Dreadnaught Artificer. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for this build. He does this every week. I think this one really captures kind of the feel of this Dreadnaught. If you'd be interested in following him on social media to see the other stuff that he's done, or to maybe reach out and see if you could commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I'll put links in the video description as always on how to do so. But first, a question. GMs, Have you ever felt frustrated trying to build, manage, and keep track of your world and your campaign? Players, have you ever felt frustrated trying to keep track of not only your own character, but also all of the people you've met, places you've been, and events that have transpired over the course of your campaign? Well, there's an easy solution to your frustrations, and I really think it's time you gave it a try. It's called World Anvil, the sponsor for today's video. World Anvil is basically the best software out there for both GMs to build their homebrew world and for players to interact seamlessly with that world. For you world builders, World Anvil, they support over 45 game systems, including D&D and Pathfinder, as well as dozens more. It'll even help you integrate your own gaming system to work with their software if you've homebrewed your own game system. World Anvil makes it incredibly easy to create wiki-style presentations of your world and your writing so that you can keep track of everything you build. They also have a fantastic interactive map builder. This is my favorite feature, I think, that you can customize to your heart's delight, and even chronicles that combine timelines with those maps so that you can plot and keep track of what happened where and when in your world, whether before your campaign started or while it's been going on. Presenting information to your players has never been easier. And yeah, World Anvil is for players too. It not only makes it easier than ever to access everything that your GM wants you to know about their world and campaign, but you can even build your character right from within World Anvil's site, regardless of the game system that you're using. Keeping your character sheet, your backstory, your spellbook, journal entries, and session notes all in one place, and it's the same place where all the info you need about your GM's world and campaign is also located, and is just a click away. So please, if you haven't yet, do yourself a favor and go check out World Anvil. Sign up for a free account. If nothing else, find out what you've been missing. When you do, I would appreciate it if you would use this URL here so that they know I sent you. I will put a link in the video description and the pinned comment as well, as always. And believe it or not, they still are giving a 51% discount on yearly subscriptions if you use the code D4 at checkout. So do that and get more than half off. Huge thanks to World Anvil. I really appreciate your guys' support. Love you guys and what you're doing. Let's get back to the build. At level 1 for our starting class, I actually almost did go fighter. Stop rolling your eyes. I'd love to have weapon masteries and a fighting style on this character. And to me, one of the major flaws actually of the UA is that at least for the two martial-focused Gishi subclasses, the Armorer and the Battlesmith, why not give them weapon masteries, right? They don't have weapon masteries. That said, for the Armorer at least, they tend to get some mastery-like benefits to at least their special weapon, so maybe at the very least we should just get weapon masteries for Battlesmiths, right? A fighting style on this build would be nice, but since we already have Constitution saving throw proficiency as an Artificer, and we'll have all the armor and weapon proficiencies that we need eventually, I don't think starting fighter here is really worth it. So I figure, what the heck? Let's just go full Artificer here with the build, yeah? There are some good reasons to beeline to 3, 5, 10, 11, even 14 and 17. And I'm also curious to see how a straight class build would compare to others that I've done so far, so yeah, let's do it. No multiclassing. As for our species, we're gonna go with what's probably my favorite out of the 2024 PHB, the Goliath, specifically the Hill Giant Goliath, so that we can proficiency bonus times per day, knock an enemy prone when we hit them with an attack, among other things. Hooray for easy advantage as a melee character when we really need it. And besides, I think Goliaths really kind of fit the feel of a character that is supposed to be a dreadnought, right? This big hulking juggernaut thing. Though a halfling or a gnome might be cool and kind of funny, especially when they get big. For our background, though, we don't actually even need to go with an old or custom background today unless you really want to, because Sage has everything we need. First off, the origin feat that I most want, a Magic Initiate Wizard, so that we can learn a couple of wizard cantrips, pick your favorite on those there, and one level 1 wizard spell that we can use once per day for free and thereafter with our spell slots, for which, as much as I'd love to have the shield spell, I think I'd take Find Familiar here so that we can have a little pet to help us scout, be our friend, and also take the help action on their turn, giving us advantage on our first attack that we make each round, so long as they can stay alive, of course. But then yes, Sage also works great because it lets us bump the ability scores that we want. I'm assuming we go the point buy method as always and say, let's take a 15 intelligence plus 2 there, a 15 con plus nothing, and then I think I'd probably go 15 wisdom plus 1 to get it to 16, though that's not necessary by any means. If you wanted to maybe put some points into dexterity instead, there's some good reasons for doing so, though it's not going to bump our armor class, at least not once we hit level 3, because at that point we'll be able to wear heavy armor. So yeah, I think I'd probably prefer a high wisdom for saving throw and skill check purposes. There's good reason to have a decent dex too, so do what you want there. For our starting equipment, I'm going to say let's get some scale mail, a shield, and then your favorite D6 simple melee weapon, a mace, a spear, hand axe, etc. We will upgrade that armor to heavy armor later. We don't have proficiency quite yet. As for damage, yeah, I mean, we're going to be using cantrips, but that might mean making a weapon attack even at level 1, because for spells that artificers get at level 1, we'd want to take Firebolt or Poison Spray, right, for like a ranged damage option. But then, yeah, artificers get True Strike in this Unearthed Arcana now, and as we all know, True Strike has been massively buffed for 2024, telling us that we can just make a weapon attack as part of casting the spell, similar to, Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, but when we do so, we use our spellcasting modifier for the plus to hit and damage of the attack. And so, doing a d6 of weapon damage plus 3 would actually hit just a little bit harder than any of our other cantrips, and I like that we can just be a melee character right from the beginning of our career here if we really want to, rather than hanging out in the back lines, slinging spells for the first couple levels and then suddenly jumping into the fray at level 3, right? Just feels like, I don't know, your character can be the character that they want to be in combat right from the beginning. They just get a lot better at it as they level. For first level spells, I would be sure to grab Cure Wounds. You can never have too many healing options, and then I'd probably use Concentration on Fairy Fire for now, giving you and your allies advantage on attacks against enemies who failed their save against it, which will be nice for you and your entire party. We also get Magical Tinkering at level 1 still, but it is different in the UA. Instead of letting you turn a mundane object into something that makes noise or light or replays a message, you can instead just create an item of adventuring gear, basically, as an action. So a bedroll or a crowbar or torch or rope or caltrops even. Some people are upset by this, and I'll admit it feels maybe a little less fun, a little less flavorful, but I have a feeling that most of us might actually use this feature more often on our artificers now. Feels a little more generally useful to me, ensuring that you kind of always have the right tool on hand if you need it. I don't know, maybe all of you are better Boy and Girl Scouts than I was and are always prepared with all of the adventuring gear that you'll ever need. I don't have really strong feelings about it either way, personally. You know what I do have strong feelings about though? My channel members. You guys, I've got to give a huge shout out and thank you to my channel members. I could not do this without you, and I'm so grateful for your support. In case you missed the announcement, I made a change recently so that if you just support at the silver level or higher, you can get all of the benefits that I offer to all of my channel members, including the library of write-ups that I create for each build, access to the community Discord server, access to the monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we have. I kind of just wanted to let people enjoy all of the benefits at kind of any level that they support at, and then just ask, hey, if you can give a little bit more, if it's worth it to you, then I appreciate it. But if you are not interested in being a member or don't feel like you really can be at this time, that's totally fine. Just watching and liking and subscribing and doing all of the things that every YouTuber asks you to do every time, those are also great ways to support the channel. So thank you for doing them. Okay, at level 2, we get what is one of the biggest changes to artificers in the entire Unearthed Arcana, and I want to talk about it a bit. So instead of being able to get infusions, right, where you infuse non-magical items with a big list of optional infusions, making those non-magical things magical, we can just now straight up replicate magic items. I mean, making magic items was always an infusion option, but now all infusions are just gone. And instead, we can make magic items at the end of a long rest. We can still know 4 magic item plans and then create 2 magic items, or have created, 2 at any one time. And those things both increase with level. And the power of the things we can make will increase with Artificer level 2 as before. So at this level, we're limited to a few things that you'd expect: +1 weapons and shields, +1 Wand of the War Mage, a Bag of Holding, Goggles of Night, etc. And then any common magic item that's not a potion, scroll, or cursed. I'm probably making a +1 weapon and a +1 shield for this build personally, and okay, for the most part, this isn't a huge difference over what we had with infusions, but I want to talk about it for a minute. In many Artificer builds that I've done in the past, I've gone on about the challenge of including infusions, now replicated magic items, right? When I crunch numbers for builds with Artificer levels. On paper, in a lab, having a +1 weapon, for example, is great. It gives you one more to hit and damage than you otherwise would have, and that's going to make your numbers look better. In reality, though, I think the vast majority of tables have a +1 weapon if they want it, right? Probably by the time they're level 5 or maybe even sooner. I did a poll on this a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, of the thousands and thousands of respondents, over 80% of you said that that situation was at least somewhat likely to be the case and very likely had more votes than any other option, almost half. So when you get Artificers out of the lab, where, let's be honest, they're probably most comfortable, right? They're Artificers. And into the game, the real benefit of being able to make yourself a +1 weapon is very, very small. I'd say it's great at level 2 when you get this ability, but by level 4 or 5 maybe, it's likely to not actually be of much benefit at all for most parties at most tables. And I think that with the new crafting rules that we've gotten from the 2024 DMG recently, with how much easier and streamlined it is for just about anyone to make magic items, that is more the case now than ever before. All it takes to make a +1 weapon is proficiency in the Arcana skill and the proper tool, 200 gold, and 5 days worth of work, as long as you can get 8 hours a day in anyways, assuming an ally's helping you out. I mean, I appreciate that that's not nothing, but it's not a lot. And that's not to say that you can't make use of the other magic items that you can create here with Replicate Magic Item. It's not all about the numbers, I know. A free bag of holding or a rope of climbing or a cap of water breathing, that's some nice utility and fun, no doubt. But I'll say what I said in that video with Will a few weeks back that I actually took some flack for in the comments. Maybe this is a hot take, but I'd rather see WotC keep Artificer infusions and just let them apply to magic items as well, not just mundane items. Let me add an additional +1 to hit and damage to an already magical weapon. Why not? I know having a +2 weapon at like level 5 sounds really good, maybe even overpowered to some, but in reality, it's not. One more to hit and damage doesn't actually do that much to average damage numbers. With extra attack, it's like 2 or 3 more damage around on average, less against a high enemy AC. If Artificers are truly supposed to be the masters of magic items, then let them be. Let them actually bring something truly unique and a little more potent to an adventuring party by being able to not just create magic items, which almost anyone can do now for not a ton of investment, but to actually enhance items that are already magical. Okay, soapbox over, let's get back to the build. At level 3, we get right tool for the job, and this has changed slightly to say that the list of items that you can create with magical tinkering now includes artisan tools. Effectively the same as before, I guess. But then, yes, we get our Artificer subclass here, and of course we're going with my favorite subclass, as I've mentioned, the Armorer. So, as an Armorer, we get Tools of the Trade first up, which says we have proficiency in heavy armor and smith's tools. Also, this is new, the time it takes us to create armor, whether magical or non-magical, is cut in half. And I mean, okay, under the new crafting rules, it would normally take 150 days to craft plate armor. Now it's 75. To me, that's like basically the same thing. Either you're going to have a ton of downtime in your campaign, months or longer, or you're not. I kind of wish they took this a little further, honestly, or it feels sort of like a non-feature to me. But I'm also not sure what would be appropriate. A quarter of the time? A tenth? Now, turning regular plate into magical plate, I mean, if you wanted to make it like a +1 plate, right, it still takes 2,000 gold and 50 days normally. I guess for us it would be 25, and if you had someone helping you, it would only be 13. So yeah, that feels like something that you might take advantage of, I guess. That's not bad. Maybe they could just further decrease the amount of time it would take to make mundane armor, I think. Anyways, we also get additional spells as an armorer, and the armorer gets some great ones, especially later. For now, it's just Magic Missile and Thunder Wave, situationally useful. The big feature, of course, is our arcane armor. This says that we can turn a suit of armor that we're wearing into our arcane armor, and when we're wearing it, we can ignore any strength requirement it may have. That's nice. It let us dump our strength, right? I hope that you've got some plate now, or at least splint mail, that Gen X of heavy armors that is so oft forgotten. You can don or doff this armor now as a single action, just in case you get attacked while sleeping or need to take it off because you got a heat metal spell on you or something. It can't be removed against our will and can even be used as a spellcasting focus, which is nice. Best of all, we get to choose one of 3 now models that our arcane armor takes on. The tanky Guardian model, the sneaky Infiltrator model, and now, yes, the Dreadnaught. This model to me is sort of less tanky than the Guardian and more like maybe a Juggernaut, right? A bruisery, control and damage focused option. And it's a lot of fun. Now, you can switch up your model after a short or long rest, which is great, but we are just going to build around the Dreadnaught model here today. Each model comes with a special weapon, and yes, when we attack with it, and only it, unless we're using True Strike, I guess, we can use our intelligence to hit and damage, which I love. The Dreadnaught's special weapon is the Armor Flail. This is an iron ball on a chain that just appears on one of our gauntlets, so I guess it's like part of the armor. Not sure if you need to hold onto it or if it's just like mounted on the back of the gauntlet or on the forearm or something. I'm sure you can choose. But anyway, it is a simple melee weapon that does a D10 of bludgeoning damage, but also has the reach property. So it's kind of like wielding a halberd with one hand, essentially. And that's awesome. A one-handed D10 weapon with reach, not bad. It unfortunately, though, does not have the heavy property, which I really wish it would, so that we could benefit from the Great Weapon Master feat, right? Nor the light property, so we can't dual wield with it either. Unless you took the dual wielder feat, I guess, but that would be weird since you'd have to use strength or dexterity for like the light weapon that you've got in one hand, unless you took Shillelagh somehow and we're using a club if we got Magic Initiate Druid. But then it's just weird. It's not going to be actually that much of a damage increase. You'd have to take a whole feat for it, and it's a half feat with an ability score that we don't really care about that much. I think I'd much rather build around the ball and chain, right? Just to see how good we can get it to be. So let's just be a sword and board character, or a ball and board, a flail and board. Anyways, you get the point. Keep your shield. It's giving you a +3 to your AC if you've gotten yourself a +1 shield right now, right? That's a lot. We're also given the giant stature feature here as a Dreadnaught, which says that intelligence modifier times per day. As a bonus action, we can grow to large size for 1 minute. Now, we could already do this once per day as a Goliath, though the features are slightly different, right? The Goliath version lasts for 10 minutes. It also increases our speed by 10 feet, plus gives advantage on strength checks. But with the Dreadnaught version, when we grow big, it increases our reach by 5 more feet for a total of 15 feet now, with our Wrecking Ball anyway. That's awesome. And yeah, the good news is, regardless of which one we use, we should be able to grow big pretty much anytime we want to for most adventuring days, right? And being able to grow big is kind of important for us because of the Wrecking Ball feature that we get as a Dreadnaught that says any creature we hit with our flail that is at least one size smaller than us, we can push them 10 feet straight away from us or pull them 10 feet towards us, and that's awesome. But I'm also a little annoyed by this. I don't know why this only works on creatures smaller than us. It's nice that we can grow large, so it will at least work on medium creatures. And I mean, you may think it would be unrealistic to be pushing and pulling a warhorse with our flail, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that every other feature in the game that puts a size limit on forced movement says that it works on large creatures or on creatures that are no more than one size larger than you. The Crusher feat works on no more than one size larger. The Charger feat, no more than one size larger. The Push Weapon Mastery is large or smaller, right? So I'm not sure why like the Dreadnaught version of forced enemy movement is so much worse. We fight a lot of large and larger enemies in D&D, right? So I'm planning on mentioning that in my feedback. It's too bad that by the time this video comes out, I believe that survey will be closed, but maybe you can find a different way to let WotC know your thoughts and feelings here. And you know what? While we're at it, here's something else that I have strong feelings about that doesn't really have to do with this build, but there is a bit of a nerf to the Guardian's Thunder Gauntlets here under the 2024 rules, thanks to the change to the Dual Wielder feat. Dual Wielder used to allow you to dual wield non-light weapons, right? So like 2 longswords or whatever, as long as they weren't two-handed weapons, or was it heavy? Anyways, the new version of Dual Wielder is great for those who are using Nick weapons to get like 1 more attack on their turn, like I've gone over in builds like the Dual Wielder Paladin, right? But the Thunder Gauntlets are not considered light weapons, and so even though the Guardian Armorer gets 2 Thunder Gauntlets, you'd never actually be able to use both of them to make attacks, rules as written, or at least not on the same turn. And that feels super lame to me. I want to play Vi in D&D, dang it. So I think they need to tweak it so that the Thunder Gauntlets are considered light, maybe for Guardians only, so that we can actually dual wield them, or maybe we just get a little caveat in there that says that, Guardians can ignore the light property requirement when dual wielding specifically their Thunder Gauntlets, something like that. Anyways, back to the build. At level 4, we get a general feat, and I really want to take the Crusher feat. Actually, I'd really love to bump my intelligence, but I think Crusher is more important and more fun, and here's why. The feat lets us bump our strength or constitution by 1. We'll take con, right, so that we can be at a nice even 16 now. But then it says that once per turn, if we hit with a bludgeoning attack, we can move our target 5 feet to an unoccupied space, if they're no more than 1 size larger than us, as I've said. This is important because it does not say, very specifically, move directly away from us, right? Which means that if we wanted to, we could first move them up into the air, and then, since we hit them with our Wrecking Ball, push them 10 feet directly away from us, which at that point would be diagonally into the air, right? Right. And yes, this works because remember, the rules tell us that if 2 things happen at the same time, in this case, moving an enemy 5 feet with Crusher and then 10 feet with the Wrecking Ball, we get to decide in which order they happen, meaning our enemy would be 15 feet in the air at the end of the attack, upon which they would immediately fall to the ground, taking an extra d6 of damage and landing prone. And I mean, if we're big, we have a 15-foot reach, so we wouldn't even need to run up to them to make another attack, though if we wanted to have advantage on the attack, which we do, we'd need to be within 5 feet, right? Right. So yeah, we're totally going golfing with our Wrecking Ball, and I love it with all of my heart. And it really just adds to like the oomph of the feel of this Dreadnaught juggernaut, right? But it would also be way cooler if it worked on creatures that were larger or smaller, instead of 1 size smaller than us. So yeah. Hopefully WotC gets that message. At level 5, as an armorer, we get extra attack so that we can make 2 Wrecking Ball attacks now, though remember we can only use Crusher once per turn. We could still push them along the ground with a second attack though, or pull a different enemy 10 feet toward us if need be. Maybe on the first attack we pull them towards us, then launch them up and away on the second attack. That's such an amazing image, right? I love that, so cool. But we also get 2nd level Artificer spells here, and this is important. Armorers get Mirror Image and Shatter for free, both situationally pretty great. Mirror Image is especially nice in 2024, I think. And while, Aid and Blur and Lesser Restoration are all worth considering, I'd say that we really want, first up, Enlarge Reduce, so that we could grow big and then enlarge ourselves to huge, so that now we could launch large targets if need be with our Wrecking Ball. But also there's Web for really nice control, which I think I'd mostly be concentrating on for now if I didn't need to get big. As a reminder, Web covers a 20-foot cube in sticky webs that make the area difficult terrain and lightly obscured, and any creature who first enters the area on a turn, it doesn't have to be theirs, that's important, or starts their turn there, has to make a dexterity save or be restrained. If they're restrained, they can use their action, very nice, they're wasting their turn now, to make an athletics check against our DC to try and break out. The other spell I want to highlight here though is Homunculus Servant, which is no longer an infusion, but an artificer spell. You can cast it as a ritual though, so that's nice, and it still just lasts until it dies or until you cast the spell again. Now, its stat block is largely the same, some tweaks, a few more hit points at this level mostly, but importantly, it works now more like other summoned by a spell creatures, in that it goes on our turn after us, but doesn't require a bonus action to do stuff. So it could just attack if we wanted it to. That's awesome. It only hits for a d6 plus the spell's level, so 2 more, but hey, it's free damage if we want to risk it dying on us, so sure, I'll count it when crunching numbers, and hey, they can make attacks from range, so hopefully they'll be able to stay relatively safe. if your DM likes to target pets and familiars, you can always bring it back as a ritual if you can spare the 100 gold component that gets used up when you cast it, and that's damage not applied to you or other allies, unless the enemy's casting Fireball all the time or something. Keep that homunculus in your backpack if your DM will allow it. At level 6, we get Magic Item Tinkerer. This essentially expands our list of magic items that we can craft, as before. We can now make +1 armor. It's not bad, that's a rare magic item, remember. as well as like Boots and Cloak of Elvenkind, Cloak of the Manta Ray, Eyes of Charming, other things, but probably most potently, any uncommon armor, wand, or weapon that isn't cursed. And especially with the new Enspelled armor and weapons, this is really potent, right? Granted, we can only put first level spells on Enspelled items at this level, uncommon items, right? You can just get first level spells or cantrips. But I mean, D6 charges of shield on your armor every day? That's arguably better than a +1 armor, right? That said, I don't know that this is overpowered, because again, it doesn't take much for anyone to be able to craft uncommon magic items now. So I think I'd still rather be able to infuse items that are already magic personally. If anything needs to be nerfed, it's probably Enspelled items. Also, importantly, some of those old unique infusions are now listed as new magic items, so we could still do Boots of the Winding Path, or Helm of Awareness, or the Repeating Shot or Returning Weapon, or even a Repulsion Shield now, which I appreciate. And since at 6th level we can also have a third magic item created for ourselves at one time, right? Sure, swap out the +1 shield that you had for the Repulsion Shield. It's still a +1, but now gives us one more way to potentially push enemies when they hit us, right? Assuming you haven't had the time or the money to just craft that thing yourself up until now. Now, one new thing that we get here as part of this feature is that we can drain a magic item. Once per day, as a bonus action, we can touch one of the items we've created and turn it into a first level spell slot if it's a common item, or a second if it's uncommon or rare. We can only do this once per day, and you probably wouldn't want to do this in combat unless you were really desperate, but in a pinch, it's a pretty cool feature. Oh, and the spell slot that we create disappears when we finish a long rest, so no creating infinite spell slots for yourself tomfoolery. Dang Tom and all of his foolin'. Okay, at level 6, it is time for our first damage report. As always, let's go over what I think combat is going to look like for us here. So I think there's two different ways to approach combat. Are we going for like as much damage as we can possibly get, or are we wanting to throw out some nice control with our damage? The fairly obvious choice most of the time, I think, will be to use some control, meaning for us, probably web. It can restrain and snare multiple enemies potentially, and with our ability to push and pull all the time, it's especially good. That said, my sort of primary goal with the build today is to just see how this Dreadnaught might compare to other builds that I've done for 2024 if we were prioritizing damage overall. And since web takes an action to cast and I average damage over a 4-round combat, missing out on dealing damage for 1 round really kind of hurts the numbers, right? So I'm just going to assume, in the name of science, that we're going all out on damage here, and again, not because I think that's how you should play the character or it's the best thing to do, but because I want to know how they stack up damage-wise to other damage-focused builds. So when you play this build, if no one else on your team is putting down a Spike Growth or a Web or a Cloud of Daggers especially, then yeah, go ahead and cast Web on round 1. If we're going all out for damage though, we're just going golfing. I'm going to assume we are launching our target into the air with one of our attacks every round to get that extra d6 of damage when they fall prone, and I'm also going to assume that we've got advantage on our attacks. We'll have it on our first attack thanks to our familiar, and after that, I'm assuming that the enemy will be prone, whether because we've launched them into the air and they've fallen, or if they're too big for that, because we knocked them down as a hill giant Goliath. Finally, I'll assume that our homunculus is making a little attack on their turn as well to stretch it just a little bit further. Anyways, each of our attacks would do a d10 plus 3 for our intelligence, plus 1 for it being a +1 weapon, and then once per turn, we'd get an extra d6 from them falling prone from 15 feet, right? And then a d6 plus 2 from our homunculus for a grand total of 2d10 plus 2d6 plus 10 if everything lands. And thus, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 29 damage per round, and against a 15 AC, it would be 27 DPR. And yeah, I mean, that's not amazing. Compared to other 2024 builds that I've done to date, it's very near the bottom at this level. Does that mean that Artificers and the new Dreadnaught are bad? No, but it probably means that they're not as good at dealing damage as other builds. That's okay. Again, we should probably think of ourselves as sort of a controller, maybe supporter first, and a bruiser, tanky damage dealer second, right? I mean, with +1 plate and a repelling shield, we're sitting at a 22 AC right now at level 6. That's awesome. And these damage calculations don't have me concentrating on anything or casting any spells. We could and probably should be concentrating on web, and thus are likely restraining 1 or 2 enemies every round. Don't forget, we could totally knock 1 enemy into the webs and then move and knock or pull a second with extra attack, right? If you were doing that, it would lower our average DPR over 4 rounds to like 22, 23. And that's fairly significant, but we would have really solid control. We're still super tanky. We'd still be doing respectable damage. So yeah, I really like where this build is at. I do wish that we had the ability to do a little more damage here if we wanted to really focus on it, but let's see if we can get any closer to that hope of mine as we go. At level 7, we still get Flash of Genius, but this got a nice change for the UA. It still lets us use our reaction to add our intelligence modifier to an ability check or saving throw that we or an ally within 30 feet of us make, but now we can wait to see if that fails first, and then use Flash of Genius to hopefully let it succeed. It's pretty strong, and we can do it intelligence modifier times per day. At level 8, we get another feat, and I think the priority now that we picked up Crusher is to, bump our intelligence, which means that we're gonna wanna take an intelligence half feat, right? Our best option is probably Warcaster, so that we can have not only proficiency on our concentration checks, but advantage as well. Plus, easier casting with our hands full, though with our armor acting as a spell focus, and with as easy as it is to draw and stow weapons in 2024, I'm not too worried about this. Plus, spells as a reaction are always fun. That said, I'd also strongly consider Fey Touched here for free Misty Step and another solid first level spell, or maybe even Telekinetic for more forced movement potential. I mean, especially since we can get Mind Sharpener soon and have Constitution saving throw proficiency already, Warcaster might not be as necessary as it would be on a lot of other spellcaster builds, but you decide. At level 9, we get Armor Replication as an armorer, and this is a nice feature, but it is a bit of a nerf, I think, over the old Armor Modifications feature. We used to get 2 additional infusions so long as they modified our armor, right? We're now told that we can learn 1 additional armor specific plan for replicate magic item, and that we can create 1 additional magic item, again, so long as it's an armor magic item. No problem, we're probably using a couple armor magic items already between our shield and our plate, right? But I mean, we used to get 2 more infusions, now we get 1 more magic item. Doesn't feel awesome, and it's not like any artificer, even armorers, are like really overpowered, so I don't know why they couldn't take this back to 2 and just keep it armor specific, personally. We do get 3rd level artificer spells here though, and this is a big deal, especially now. Armorers, as before, get the fantastic lightning bolt and the incredible hypnotic pattern for free for either solid multi-target damage or a really fantastic multi-target control option, as long as they're not immune to charm anyways. But on top of that, I would recommend considering Blink for defensive purposes. Dispel magic is always nice to have, Revivify in case of emergencies, and then Haste. Now, if we were prioritizing damage overall, then sure, we could start casting Haste on ourselves now to get an extra attack every turn, not to mention a +2 to our AC and Dex save, more move speed. Just remember, when haste ends, we're basically dead in the water for a round. So if you're going to do this because, you have a solid controller or spike growther or something in your party already, then I'd probably take Warcaster last level. If you don't have another controller in your party, then it might be a little silly for you to not be casting Hypnotic Pattern as your go-to concentration spell now. It might be a little silly to not be doing that even if you have another controller in your party. But in the name of science, let's see what happens when we use haste in our level 9 damage report. Okay, since last check, we have bumped our intelligence to 18 and picked up haste. All other gains that we've made are in the support, defense, control, and utility realms, and that's great. But now, on round 1, we would potentially be growing big with our bonus action, casting haste with our action, making 1 attack. Remember, haste gives us an extra action that lets us make 1 attack, even on the round we cast it, right? And then have our homunculus do some damage, and then on subsequent rounds, we would be making 3 attacks per turn, plus our homunculus. And so, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would now do 38 damage per round on average, and against a 16 AC it would be 35 DPR. And I mean, that's a significant bump over last time percentage-wise, but we are now dead last compared to other 2024 builds that I've done to date at this level, which tells me, again, we should probably be concentrating on a control spell here, unless maybe someone's got a spell on the battlefield that you can be pushing and pulling enemies into to great effect, right? A Spike Growth, a Cloud of Daggers, etc. And I mean, in that case, yeah, if you're not concentrating on Hypnotic Pattern, probably put haste on the Barbarian or the Fighter, or heck, the Rogue, so that they can hold one of their actions and then double up on sneak attack, right? It's okay if this Dreadnaught isn't the best damage dealer on the field, as they potentially bring a lot of other great tricks with them to the fight. I know. I just wish we had an option to do more damage if we wanted to. At level 10, we get Magic Item Adept, and this is, I think, probably the most powerful Artificer feature that just doesn't show up in the spreadsheets, because it lets us attune to 4 magic items instead of the usual 3. I mean, depending on your table, of course, the higher level you get, the more of your character's power tends to come from magic items, right? And the best magic items usually require attunement. And if you can attune to more than anyone else, well, that's a nice advantage over them that you would have. That's a nice power increase. What's more, hitting level 10 in Artificer opens up new magic item plans, and this is where things start to get really juicy, because we can now craft uncommon rings and wondrous items. I'm again not going to just scour the DMG to tell you all the best things you should be crafting here, but there are really good ones. I'll maybe just mention that the Mind Sharpener, which used to be an infusion available to us at level 2, is now an uncommon ring available for us to replicate at this level, and it makes me a little sad that we had to wait this long to get it, because it is super powerful. Kind of a nerf to Artificers here. It also requires attunement now, so it's kind of a double whammy. I would for sure want to get it though, I think. I mean, if we didn't just take 5 days and 200 gold to just craft it ourselves earlier in our campaign, I guess. Because yeah, it's really powerful. It has a D4 of charges per day that you can just use to auto-succeed on a failed concentration check. Uses our reaction, and that's incredible. In addition to that, sure, consider the Spell Refueling Ring, or the Winged Boots, or your other favorite uncommon ring or wondrous item. But level 11 is the real belle of the ball for this Unearthed Arcana, and the one that everybody's talking about, because this is where we get the Spell Storing item. This feature has always been great. It used to let us pick a 1st or 2nd level Artificer spell that takes an action to cast, and then store 2 times your intelligence modifier number of charges of that spell in a weapon or spellcasting focus. And then we're told that while holding the object, any creature who's capable of taking an action can produce the spell's effect from it, including concentration spells, which they would have to concentrate on, but the spell uses your spellcasting ability modifier otherwise. In the Unearthed Arcana, it is exactly the same, except the spell can be 1st, 2nd, or 3rd level now, and that kinda changes everything. Because yeah, that could mean Dispel Magic, or Fly, or Haste, or Revivify, but if you're an Armorer, that could also mean Lightning Bolt, or Hypnotic Pattern, because Artificer subclass spells count as Artificer spells, and that's a wee bit nuts. That said, I really hope they don't remove 3rd level spells from the item. I think it's amazing, and I think Artificers could use something this amazing at this level. I do think, though, that they might want to tweak it so that you get still 2 times your intelligence modifier and charges, but maybe have it so that 1st level spells count as 1 charge, 2nd count as 2, and 3rd count as 3 or something. Or maybe 1st and 2nd count as 1, but 3rd count as 2. So instead of being able to Hypnotic Pattern 10 freaking times a day, which is crazy, maybe they can only do it 3 or 5. Feels a little more reasonable, doesn't it? I don't know, just a thought. It probably needs to be reined in a tad, but again, I hope they keep 3rd level spells as an option, because it's awesome. I will add though that they'd probably want to give alchemists some better 3rd level spell options, because Gaseous Form and Mass Healing Word aren't nearly as cool as what every other Artificer subclass gets here. I guess I should say, for those who don't realize it, that yeah, the big play here is to give your spell storing item to your homunculus, or sure, your familiar if you've got one, and have them cast the spell from the item. And now you can essentially be concentrating on 2 spells at a time if you wanted to, right? When I'm crunch numbers, yeah, I'm going to be assuming that we're giving our spell storing item to our homunculus. And for what it's worth, I hope they don't change that. The item is way less cool if another player has to use it to cast the spell. At level 12, we get another feat, and I think we got to bump intelligence, take it to 20, cap it, since pretty much everything we do relies on our intelligence, right? And then at level 13, we get 4th level Artificer spells. Armorers get Fire Shield and Greater Invisibility for free. Very nice, very handy. But in addition to that, I think I'd consider, at least if we were damage focused, on swapping out Haste now for Summon Construct. We are turning into a veritable menagerie now, aren't we? It's a nice spell. It takes an action to cast, lasts for an hour, so you could potentially get multiple combat encounters out of it, though I'm not going to assume that we are. But then it creates a magical construct made of metal, stone, or clay, your choice when you create them, and I'm just going to say pick your favorite here. They all have some nice pros that I won't get into. And then, like most summon spells these days, the construct acts on your initiative after you, but doesn't require you to use any of your own actions or bonus actions to verbally command them. When cast at the 4th level, they get to make 2 slam attacks that hit decently hard. It's a d8 plus 8 each hit. And even though we'd be having to give up our first turn in an encounter to cast this spell, on average, over 4 rounds, it's going to outpace the damage bump that we would get from haste. So sure, I'll assume that that's what we're using in combat now. And that brings us to our next damage report. When it comes to damage, since last check, we have capped our intelligence, picked up a new spell and pet in the form of our construct spirit, and then added a lightning bolt to every single round. Wait, what? Surely we're putting Hypnotic Pattern in that spell storing item and having our homunculus concentrate on that, right? I mean, maybe, probably, but let's not discount the power of 6d8 damage to potentially multiple enemies. Don't get me wrong. Especially if you don't have someone else focusing on controlling the battlefield in your party, Hypnotic Pattern is arguably the better, smarter play. But by level 13, a fair number of enemies are going to be immune to charm. A lot more than are immune to lightning damage anyways. And if we can get 2 or 3 of them in a 5-foot wide, 60-foot long line of lightning, we've got 10 charges on this thing. That's a lot of damage. And you know what's worse for your enemies than being charmed and incapacitated by Hypnotic Pattern? Being dead. The dead condition is a powerful form of control. So, hey, for fun, sure. Let's say your homunculus is casting lightning bolt every round. I hope they truly can stay safe in your backpack or something, because they are for sure getting targeted by the enemies now if they weren't before. And hey, if they die, have your familiar swoop in and grab that spell storing item before the enemy does. Wouldn't that be awesome? Like your homunculus dies, drops the gem or whatever, and then an enemy runs in, grabs your spell storing item and starts blasting you and all of your friends. The answer is yes. Yes, that would be awesome. Anyways, for ease of number crunching, I'm going to assume that the enemy has a 50% chance to succeed on the save against Lightning Bolt, keeping in mind that they will still take half damage on a successful save. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class here, we would now on average do 68 damage per round, and against a 17 AC, it would be 64, and okay. That's like almost double since last check. Amazing what a little lightning bolt can do for your damage. And keep in mind, I'm only assuming that we're hitting one enemy with lightning bolt here. Your total damage to multiple enemies is probably going to be a lot higher a lot of the time. And frankly, giving the enemy a 50% chance to succeed on their saving throw might be too conservative also. I mean, that would be a +7 to their dex save against our 18 DC right now. Anyways, compared to other DPR builds to date, at this level, we're actually kinda in the mix finally. Upper end of tier 2 now. And yes, for the record, I've decided to split the 2024 sustained damage build into 2 tiers now. The spreadsheet was getting too full, so check the link in the video description to see that spreadsheet and make sure you look for both tabs, right? And it makes me happy to know that if we wanted to focus on damage, we could actually compete damage-wise with other builds. We're not leading the pack, but we're competitive. So maybe letting 3rd level spells be in the spell storing item isn't too powerful, yeah? I don't know. Anyways, let's see what our damage looks like coming down the home stretch. So at level 14, we get magic item Savant. Things continue to get juicy. So with this, we not only can attune to 5 magic items now, so good, but we can replicate more powerful magic items, namely rare rings, wands, weapons, armor, or wondrous items. And this might be the point at which I would rather have the feature as it exists in the UA than I would even an ability to infuse items that are magical, because while sure, anyone in theory could craft rare magic items, uncommon items probably take 5 days and 200 gold, like I've said. Rare items take 25 days with a helper and 2,000 gold. And I don't know about you guys, but it's rare that I get 25 days of downtime when I'm in the middle of an adventure. Usually there's a little bit more urgency than that, right? It's not impossible by any means. And I guess you don't have to have downtime. You only need 8 hours a day. So maybe if you're adventuring only for 8 hours and you have 8 hours in addition to your long rest, it's gonna take a while. And rare magic items are really good. And no, I'm not gonna go into all of them, but let's at least maybe think about weapons here. Should we go for a Flame Tongue or Vicious Wrecking Ball? An extra 2d6 damage per hit. It's really nice. Then again, there's not a plus to hit on Flame Tongue or Vicious weapons, and that becomes pretty important, especially at higher level. What about a Dragon's Wrath weapon from Fizzbands? Those would give an extra +1 to hit and damage, an extra 1d6 on a hit, but then also an extra 5 damage when we get a natural 20 on our attack. I think I might like that slightly more. It's just a little bit better average damage against higher AC enemies, and we're level 14, so yeah, let's assume a rare version of the Dragon's Wrath weapon. Let me know what magic item you would be crafting with this build at level 14 in the comments. There's a ton of great ones to choose from. At level 15, we get Perfected Armor, and this gives us a benefit based on what armor model we're using. The Dreadnaught gets a damage bump to their Wrecking Ball. It goes from a D10 to 2d6. And I think I need to talk about this. I mean, on the one hand, doing 2d6 damage with a one-handed weapon that has reach is pretty awesome sounding, right? On the other hand, that's only an average damage increase of 1.5 damage per hit. And you know, sometimes I think Wizards of the Coast has a tendency to overestimate the value of increasing a thing by a die size or two. Like the Ranger Capstone taking Hunter's Mark from a d6 to a d10, for example. We're level 15. 3 more damage per turn on average with extra attack, right? It's just not that awesome. I like that we get some scaling. I just think it could be more. How about 2d10 instead of 1d10? Would that be really crazy overpowered? I don't think so. 5.5 damage more per hit, maybe 11 if you land both attacks on your turn at level 15. That said, we do get some other additional benefits here. When we use our giant stature feature, our reach now increases by 10 feet instead of 5, meaning we'd have a 20-foot reach with our Wrecking Ball. That's cool. And we can grow to huge instead of just to large, meaning we could finally push or pull large creatures or smaller with our Wrecking Ball, right? Huge creatures if we cast enlarge on ourselves after we get big, right? And I mean, maybe best of all, actually, we can fly now. Yay, flight. At level 16, we get another feat, and again, in the interest of trying to find more damage options, I'll say let's grab Charger. It's a dexterity or strength half feat. Hopefully that's meaningful to you here. But then says that if we move at least 10 feet in a straight line towards our target first and then hit them with an attack, we can either push them 10 feet away from us or do an extra d8 of damage. So I mean, sure, that means we could now launch them so that they're 25 feet off the ground instead of 15, meaning they take an extra d6 of damage from falling, right? But of course, in that case, wouldn't we be better off with the extra d8 of damage option instead of an extra d6? Sure. Depends on if you've got a good reason to push them further, I guess. If 10 more feet will get them into your friend's area of effect, spell, or off a cliff, then sure. The real reason I wanted to get this is because the Charger feat lets us push a creature so long as they're no more than one size larger than us. Like, as I've said, I think the Dreadnaught should probably have had all along, or at least large or smaller. But anyways, I mean, now that we can grow huge, we could actually lift and launch even gargantuan creatures into the air with our little launch tactic, right? When you combine Crusher with Charger, causing even the biggest monsters to fall prone. No save, we just gotta hit them. And I love that. But yeah, when I'm crunching numbers, I'm just gonna assume that we're doing an extra d8 of damage from the feat. You know, launch them with the first attack, and then when they land, they're 15 feet away from you, run up and enjoy the Charger benefit with the second. Even pushing them another 10 feet if they're one size smaller than you anyways. Okay, finally for us, at level 17, Artificers get 5th level spells, the highest spell level that they reach as a half caster, right? And armorers get Pass Wall, okay, but then Wall of Force for free. I mean, we have got some seriously great control options on this build that, again, if you're smart, depending on your party's makeup, you should be concentrating on probably. Now, with this, to lock enemies behind an invisible force field that they can't get out of unless they have the Disintegrate spell or teleportation, right? And sure, also, you should consider Bigby's Hand and Greater Restoration, but in the interest of seeing just how far we could stretch our damage, sure, I'll say let's try concentrating on Animate Objects. Now, I know what you're thinking. This spell isn't nearly as good as it used to be, and while that is generally true, I think, here's the thing. As you'll see when the new monster manual comes out, there's no longer such thing as resistance to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage in the game under the 2024 rules. And while there are a fair number of monsters that have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, there are a lot more that don't. Meaning that I think the damage from Animate Objects is a lot less likely to be resisted than it used to be. The spell costs an action to cast and lets us animate 5 objects that aren't being worn or carried or are fixed to a surface. Now, if we animate medium or smaller objects, they count as 1 each, but large objects count as 2 and huge ones count as 3. They sprout legs and they take their turn after you, though they do require a bonus action to command them initially. You know, I think you could just say, attack who I attack, or attack these specific creatures 1 time at the beginning of combat and then be done, right? So the question is, what's the mathematically most advantageous size of objects to be animating? Technically, it would be 1 huge object and 1 large one. Together, they would do 36 damage per round on average. Of course, there might not be huge or large objects in the room to animate, and that size creature might make getting around a little difficult in a small room, right? I'll assume that that's what we're gonna do when I crunch numbers in the name of science, but if you would rather do the old, animate 5 silver coins trick, go ahead. The damage in that case would be significantly less. It's about 28 on average, but tiny allies on the battlefield can make life a little bit easier for you and your allies when you're trying to maneuver and get to your enemies, right? Anyways, you should probably concentrate on Wall of Force. I'm going to see what the damage looks like when we use Animate Objects. And hey, I mean, isn't it nice to have options? Okay, for our final damage report then. Since last check, we have picked up a little damage bump from Charger, but more importantly, I think the ability to launch bigger enemies from Charger. An extra d6 of damage per hit from our Dragon's Wrath Wrecking Ball, plus 5 on a crit, which now does 2d6 per hit instead of 1d10, right? And then a little damage from our concentration by swapping out Summon Construct for Animate Objects. And I do, for the record, like that we're kind of constantly changing up our spell as we level. Our concentration damage spell keeps things a little more interesting, gives us a little variety. On top of all of that, of course, we've gained some really nice utility and control options. But our damage here averaged over 4 rounds. Against a 10 AC would be 89 damage per round, and against an 18, it would be 84 DPR. And similar to last time, that puts us near the top of Tier 2 compared to other 2024 builds that I've done to date at this level. So again, we continue to be competitive damage-wise if we want to be, thanks to the big late-game buffs that this UA has given to at least Dreadnaught Artificers, and I love that. But I do have a lot of thoughts about all of this, so let's discuss them in the final thoughts. The tier score for this build, if you were to take the damage that they do against each of the enemy armor classes that we calculate for at each of the 4 damage reports and just average them into one big number, we end up with a 49.3, and that puts us very near the bottom of all DPR builds to date, but just barely above the all-day build though, so that's nice. I kind of use them as a sort of a baseline to measure against. But again, the reality is that this build is kind of below everyone up until level 11, at which point they can become competitive damage-wise, thanks largely to the massive buff to the spell storing item. And okay, here's the thing. I know what a lot of you have been thinking, or maybe shouting at the screen for the last 50 minutes or so. Not everyone has to be the best damage dealer, right? Or artificers aren't supposed to be amazing damage dealers. That's not what makes them good or powerful. That's not their role. I get it. I know you don't believe me, but I do. But I guess my paradigm has kind of always been one of, wouldn't it be cool if every class had a way to do competitive damage if they wanted to build their character that way. I'm not saying that they have to be the best or that every subclass of every class should have that option. And I mean, I know it's tricky. You got to balance things, but still not make every class just kind of feel like they're the same as all the other classes. I think Pathfinder can kind of feel that way sometimes, if I'm being honest. 2E here talking about. But yeah, Artificers bring a ton of fun, flavor, and power, and generally that power comes from their spells augmented by some of their other fun features and abilities, and that's great. But as we've seen, if they wanted to, if they build for it, at least this subclass, if they were willing to sacrifice support and control at tier 3 and tier 4, they can absolutely swing with some of the bigger damage dealing builds. And I guess I just wish that could be an option at tier 1 and tier 2 play as well. I think if I could make every class a little more balanced in 5e by waving a magic wand, I think that every class and subclass would have some knobs, right? The utility knob, the survivability knob, the support and or control knob, the damage knob, and that every class maybe had access to all of those knobs. Maybe some classes had access to 2 or 3, another subclass had access to 2 or 3 different ones, right? And they're not all the same. And then depending on how you build, on your spell choices, on your weapon masteries, on your feats, etc., you could kind of turn those knobs to where the 1 or 2 that you really wanted your character to focus on, that you wanted to build around, could be like better than average. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier to say than do, but I think Wizards of the Coast kind of agrees with me on that design philosophy. I might be wrong, but I just think it's awesome when you can, with the right subclass and build choices, make a good damage dealer out of any class if you wanted, or a decent controller, or a decent utility character, or a decent support character. You just have to maybe turn down some knobs in order to turn up others. And I think you can get that damage knob to a good place with this new Dreadnaught as it stands in the Unearthed Arcana right now, but not really until late game. And when we can crank that knob up a little bit, it's beyond the point at which a lot of us are even playing the game. So yeah, I'd love to see them have the ability to do that in the early and mid game too, if the player wanted to. All of that said, regardless, I think this new Dreadnaught would be a ton of fun to play, even if it were just released as is. You'd be really hard to kill. You'd be throwing enemies all over the battlefield with your Wrecking Ball, and most likely throwing down some really debilitating control while you were at it. And even if it didn't do boatloads of damage, at least until later, it would still just be this impossible to ignore force in combat that would excel at making life miserable for your enemies, and I really want to try it out in game. So that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something that might be useful. I hope you know that I love you, because I do. Thank you so much for all that you do for me, for this channel. It means the world to me. I hope you have a really great day and a fantastic week and a fantastic 2025. Happy New Year. But if you don't, or if you're not currently, I hope you'll hang in there. Please don't give up. You got this. I hope that you will stay safe and do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. If I had a spell of magic, I would make this enchantment for you. A burgundy heart-shaped medallion with a window that you could look through, so that when all your mirrors are angry with your faults and all you must do, you could peek through that heart-shaped medallion and see you from my point of view. David Wilcox. I love him. He never made it big. He was kind of had a moment there in the 90s, in the early 2000s. He's kind of a singer-songwriter. I think if I were to ever attempt a professional music career, my sound would probably most closely mimic his. He's really good. And that song is perfect for the build today because He's singing about a magic item that he created for his friend. So I just spent 2 hours recording this video, and then when I went to start editing it, realized that my microphone had come unplugged, and so it didn't get any audio. It's just me going like this, silently. So now I get to do it all over again, and that's awesome, because it means I get to pretend like it's the first time, and I'm super excited to be talking about this stuff. Hopefully, it's not noticeable that my energy is lagging, aside from the fact that I have a cold, which isn't helping. Ah well. Note to self, always run a sound check. Been a long day, okay? I'm like 3 hours into recording this video now. And I have a cold, if you can't tell. The outtakes are probably just going to be nothing but me sniffing and clearing my throat. But yeah. Okay, dog. With this ability, because that's what, because they're again. It also requires it. And nothing like recording a video twice. I need a nap.